Take a seat. Take a seat. Well, first off, welcome everyone to 2023 Google VetNet Career Week. Give it a round of applause. Right? For those who don't know, VetNet Career Week is a free virtual global event where we offer career tools, support, training, one-on-one personal resume reviews for thousands of global veterans, military spouses, and service members. In partnership with our nonprofit partner, Welcome.us, we also open this up to Ukrainian and Afghan refugees and U.S. newcomers who are displaced by the wars. In fact, today we're joined in the audience by Kind Deeds, a nonprofit who focuses on equipping injured Ukrainian soldiers with prosthetics and rehab. And alongside them, we have 6 wonderful heroes from Ukraine who are sitting beside us. So give them a round of applause. We're honored and humbled to be in your presence. Thank you for joining us. We're also joined here by Noah Courier, who is the CEO of Oscar Mike, a wonderful nonprofit that focuses on sports and giving people the mental strength, especially disabled veterans, to continue on with their careers. So thank you so much, Noah, for joining us. So as I said, this is a 3-day event. Today is the end of day 1, where we had 15 plus functional panels across 150 Google volunteers across 15 different functions, where people talked about different roles and responsibilities that people can learn about at Google. Tomorrow, we have 12 plus industry panels where if you're interested in sports, you can listen on from representatives from New York Yankees, the Atlanta Hawks, Major League Baseball.
What the fuck?
I know. You're invited. You're invited.
You had no idea.
If you're interested in tech, we got Amazon, Microsoft, we got Salesforce, we got Google. No stand-up comedy panels.
Came on the wrong day.
Yeah, sorry, man, sorry. And day 3 is 12 plus free training lessons from Google Cloud, from Salesforce, from Breakline, a number of different organizations. So I encourage everyone listening globally on the live stream or anyone here to go to goo.gle/vetnetcw. You're probably watching it on the same website to sign up for the exact event that you want to attend and watch it live. Now, with
I have a
that,
question.
yes, go ahead.
Do you guys work?
Barely. On the weekends, we get some in there.
All right. This is every day. Come in, meet the Yankees. And then Thursday, we're going to have a Sunday bar. Everybody's going to make a Sunday. And it's all good.
You got to be our spokesperson for our employee branding. I love it. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, and so with that, I'll stop talking. I'm going to pass it over to Karen and John to lead off with this keynote fireside chat. So over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Mike.
Good job, Mike.
Woo!
Good work.
It is, hello, New York. Hello, world. It is so great to be here with you today. It's an honor to be here.
Is this being filmed? Are we on camera?
Yeah, look, those cameras. I mean, you are being streamed globally, John.
I can't
globally.
I made it to the future.
We are here in New York City, but we have a global audience to kick off this fireside chat, and it's part of Google's VetNet Career Week, as you heard Mike say.
Yes.
We have veterans watching, we have spouses, children of vets, we have men and women in uniform, we have first responders, and we have our U.S. newcomers from Afghanistan and Ukraine,
awesome.
All watching in, and they want to hear from you.
I'll do it.
Okay, yes. So I am super, super excited to be here with the one, the only, Jon Stewart.
What?
I mean, you guys, award-winning, okay, let's just a few things. Award-winning journalist and comedian, you know, lifelong advocate for veterans and men and women in uniform, host of the critically acclaimed The Daily Show.
I remember that.
Currently streaming on Apple TV one of his favorite, Apple TV.
Sure.
The problem,
No disrespect, Google. No disrespect.
Yeah, exactly. The problem with Jon Stewart, and particularly for this audience, Jon, I mean, an incredible advocate for veterans, men and women in uniform, service members. Well, I mean, you've gone above and beyond, and we're super excited to talk to you today.
Sure, I'm happy to be here. I'm excited, and as part of the entire Google Vet Week that you have planned.
VetNet Week.
Yes. What I said.
Actually, it's VetNet Career Week.
VetNet Career Week.
There you go.
That's what I meant.
No, it's great to have you. So when they first told me about this, and I shared this with Jon in the green room, I was super nervous. I'm like, holy cow. I'm going to be talking to Jon Stewart on stage and super intimidating. What makes you so damn intimidating?
I think just physicality.
You are a big guy.
When you work out as much as I do, people can't help but be somewhat, intimidated by the physical, I guess.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll walk in a room and they'll be like, eclipse.
You're starting to, yeah.
That's why I keep the jacket on because, obviously, this is a gun-free zone. I would get that other, but I tore a rotator cuff.
You are notable for some tough interviews. You're fair but tough. What's been one that stuck with you? Like maybe the one that got away that you wish.
An interview I wish I had done or hadn't done.
Yeah. Well, either way.
Well, generally, Donald Rumsfeld is probably.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember Donald Rumsfeld, but he's the one who made many of you veterans. He had this idea after 9/11, I don't know if you were in New York, where he was like, what we should do is just invade a completely different fucking country than the one that caused it. And it sent everybody there. And then he wrote a book about it. And I stayed up nights reading through the book and dog-earing pages and finding logistical and logical fallacies and traps. And I would, and I had the whole thing planned out and was obsessing over it. And we sat down and I said to him, when you were selling this war, and he goes, well, when we were presenting, selling, you sold it. You took like a used car salesman does. He takes the good parts that he wants people to know and doesn't mention the bad parts. Agree to disagree. And then I just kept going through my whole thing, and he kept dodging and prevaricating, and I realized the whole interview should have been in the difference between salesmanship with something as consequential as war and a casus belli making a case. That should have been the whole interview, but I was so up my own ass about all the ways I was going to get him that I just got lost in it.
I'm not one of those interviewers, just so you know.
No, you've been great so far. But I was really like, I'm going to nail this fucker. Like, it's over. Rumsfeld, done.
Yeah.
You go to the interview with the interviewer you have, not the interviewer you... You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And it sucked. And I didn't, it was diffused and not that pointed and kind of rambling. It was my fault. And it bothered me. I mean, I was up berating myself for days afterwards. And I realized some fundamental truth about the Iraq War. And that is, I lost more sleep over an interview about the Iraq War than Donald Rumsfeld lost over the Iraq War. And that was fundamentally so frustrating to me. But the worst part of it was, he knew it. And he knew when he walked away.
He got you.
Exactly. And then he sent me a note. It's one of the worst notes I've ever read. It said, "Hey, Jon, really enjoyed it." Wish I had known you when we were younger. I bet we would have been friends. Motherfucker!
Wow.
It'd be like if Cheney had written me a letter like, you have pretty eyes. But it really was. It was a lesson in, and in some ways this is where a lot of the advocacy comes from. He was so disassociated from the real life ramifications of the decisions he made in a situation room, and dispassionate. And that disconnect comes at a cost.
Yeah.
And that cost is the lives of service people. And that frustration is what drives a lot of that.
You are said to have like this internal justice meter, like a barometer of right and wrong.
It's called asthma.
Yeah.
It's in the...
But like you lost sleep over this interview. You lost sleep over this interview because you felt like he got you a little bit.
I didn't feel like he got me. I felt like, you know, when you look at these things sometimes, you're litigating a point of view. Mm-hmm. And imagine if you're a litigator and you feel like the clients you're representing are those that have been harmed by his callousness.
Yes, yes.
And you let them down. It's not about him getting me. It's about me not being an effective advocate for all those who wouldn't get a chance to sit in that room and look him in the eye. Mm-hmm. That's what gets you. Yeah. You feel like these folks who sacrifice so much, and you get this one chance to maybe be there. Yeah.
Yeah, you let them down.
That's right.
I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And you know, where did this hunger to get things right, this advocacy, this passion, where did that come from? Tell us about little Jon, Jersey boy. Tell us about young Jon.
All right.
Young Jon, Jersey boy, Bruce Springsteen fan.
Sure. It's just not the nickname I would have gone with.
Yeah. What nickname would you have gone with?
Big John. That is.
So where does this fight come from? Where does that emanate from?
Overall, I think it comes from feeling like too many people, that life is too hard for too many people for no apparent reason. And that, as they say, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But it doesn't bend by itself, and what they don't tell you is there's people trying to bend it back. And it's growing up in an area where I never felt like I fit in. It was a very sort of conservative and blue collar, and I worked in a bar called the Bottom Half. Literally, the bar was called the Bottom Half. It was underneath a liquor store on Route 1 in Trenton, New Jersey. If Disneyland is the happiest place in the world, it was a respite for people who like to drink in basements, but not alone.
Right.
And in the town I was from, I worked with my buddy Vinny Regolia and his dad,
good Italian.
Vinny Regolia.
Yeah.
And their daughter, Vinny Regolia. Like they were all, there's a lot of Vinny Regolias. And this was the height of the first Gulf Wind, so it was a lot of like Ayatollah Assahola t-shirts and all that kind of shit. And this was going to be my life. But I also worked at a punk club in Trenton called City Gardens. And in that club, there were a lot of bands that you may or may not remember. I'm a bit older than all of you, maybe combined. As I look around the room, I see, if you add it up, Dead Kennedys and Black Flag and Suicidal Tendencies and the Ramones, and like these enormously creative, but there was an energy to it. And as I experienced that, I thought, oh, I don't have to live here. I don't have to just work in a bar under a liquor store and just do the thing and just grow old at that. You know, I can go back there tonight, and the people I loved, man, I'm sure the same guys are on the same stools, man. I could, hey, Tommy,
Yeah.
holy shit, did they get your license back yet? It's coming, couple weeks, you know. And I just decided, like, on an impulse, like, I was going to get the fuck out of there. Mm-hmm. So I sold my car and I packed up a U-Haul and I got a 6-week sublet in New York City. And I was figuring, well, that's plenty of time to make it in show business.
Yeah. 6 weeks.
Probably have 2 weeks to spare. Probably going to leave early. And that was it. And just decided to take a swing.
So that's Little John to Big John.
I would put it that way, but yeah.
So, you know, one of the things I read about you, many things I read about you, is this courage it took to do stand-up. I think you took the sublet, but it took you kind of a year to get on stage. That
I think anytime you're in a room with veterans and they want to talk about the courage to do stand-up, you know, it's kill or be killed. You're out there, a man with a microphone, against all odds, and if it doesn't work, well, you come back the next night. No, it was more that it was such a strange. You have to understand, like, this was a very eccentric decision. It's not like I announced to my friends, like, I'm moving to New York and I think I'm going to try stand-up, and they're like, we've been waiting for this. It was more like, enjoy the gay pride parade, you fool. Yeah. You know, like, this is where I come from. Yeah. So it's not like they were accepting. They ridiculed it, as well they should have, I guess. And it wasn't in my roots. It wasn't in my bones. It's just something I thought I needed to do, and it took a while. And I did every shit job you can do in New York City, and there were nights I'd walk home at 3 a.m. You know, I shared a room with a guy, like, not an apartment, like a room. I lived in a loft bed. Like, I was a grown man. And I lived in, like, a bunk bed, a top bunk bed, with, like, a raging Wall Street alcoholic. Like, it was...
And with your bulk, I mean, that top bunk is pretty tough, right?
You don't want... And when it got windy, you know, the whole thing would sway. And I can remember walking home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of my food came from... I was a day bartender in a Mexican restaurant, and then I would go over to the Comedy Cellar on McDougal Street, work there at night. You work for a plate of hummus. And I'd walk home being, I'm the luckiest motherfucker alive. Like... It just was such a freeing environment for creativity and learning about yourself and taking chances and all those things that you hope to do.
Yeah.
You know.
You've created this incredible network of friends in this comedic space and journalists, and you've just made this incredible network. Mm-hmm. Talk to sort of the veterans in this community about how you create network, because we've talked about this when people transition out of the military service and this network, and they're seeking community. How do you create that community? What advice do you have for them?
So it's a really different situation. You know, comedy is like a little bit of a brotherhood and those kinds of things, but it's created from the ongoing act of trying to get on stage, right? The difference between that and the veterans community is when you're gone, you're gone. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not going to be like, oh, I got out of the Army, but we're waging a little bit of a war down in the village, and we're all going to get together and plan some shit. Like, it's done. And that's a really hard thing to come to grips with, especially if you've been injured or you're ill. You know, when you lose community, it's isolating. And then when you're injured or ill, it's even further isolating, right? And creating those communities is honestly, like, it's one of the most difficult things to do, because oftentimes those communities are just kind-hearted people who want to help you. Thank you for your service. Yeah. And we're going to get you 10% off of Chili's appetizers. Yeah. Do you like pachachos? Were you in Fallujah? we've got a pancake special. It's not that it's not well-intentioned, but it views it through the lens of charity. Mm-hmm. We're going to help you. What I realized with the veterans communities is it's to our advantage to connect you in a network, to reactivate that thing in you that was mission-oriented, that was focused on service, that was there to solve problems. That's not helping you. That's helping us. That's a loss that we do. The hardest thing for people to remember in this country about the military is its most valuable asset is the human capital. The thing we spend the most money on are obviously the tools and the toys and the planes and the weapons and the thing. But the human capital is the only thing that matters. And it's the one thing that when you're out of the Army, they could give a fuck about. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that's so galling. So we started an internship program at The Daily Show. It came from, there was a gentleman that I knew named Sid Goodfriend who started, I think it was called ATP Partners. It's a veterans organization where he tries to get mentors. And traditionally that's how it goes, like, there's a veteran and I'd like you to mentor him. Sure, what does that mean? Like, I call him like once a month. And maybe if he has a question, answer it.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, I bet that'll change his life. So what we did is we created an immersion program. And we signed up 24 veterans for each semester. The first week of the program, the veterans just hung out, just to see how the show works, to get a sense of the organization, right? And then the next 8 weeks, what we did is, because, you know, veterans aren't students whose parents are rich and they can afford to pay for internships where they just sit around for 8 weeks and work around the show. Yeah. So we would do it at night. And once a week at night, they would come in and they would meet with one department at the show. So they would learn that a talk show isn't just a host and writers, it's people in sound, it's people in the director's room, it's the editors. It's all these different jobs that you might never have known about. And each time you try and educate yourself to a different part of this organization to understand it. And then the last day was a career fair where we get all of our friends that are in the business to come in and interview the veterans to see if we can get them jobs. The thing that struck me about it, and I don't know if this is going to resonate with you, is I spent half the time in that internship program not telling them about television, but convincing them that their experience mattered.
Yeah.
That was the part that blew my mind. Because here's what they would say. I'm intimidated because television is basically made up of rich white kids from Westchester. And the reason is their parents can afford internships. And those internships, when I'm going to hire a production assistant, who do I go to? Who was that intern from in the spring? That kid that didn't mind washing the grapes and did everything else? Hire that guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you can't get in that door, then you can't get in. And so these guys would sit around and they would be intimidated by these kids from Westchester that were doing internships. And I used to say to them, yeah, this probably isn't the business for you, because I'm going to tell you why. It's high fucking pressure. You know, this place is about working as a team on a mission to get it done together. And if you can't handle that pressure, because let me tell you something, if the shit goes wrong, you know, we might have to retape something. And you just watch them click and go, oh.
Yeah.
And they would start to talk about their experiences, and you would go, you have no idea that what you're bringing to an organization, they would be unbelievably lucky to be able to buy low on somebody with the kind of experience and upside that almost every veteran brings to the table. we're viewing it backwards. And once we made that switch, everything changed.
What, of all those interns you brought in over the years, how many stayed in television?
No, we didn't hire them. Here's the thing. A lot of them. So now there's not a show that I can go to in New York where I don't meet an alumni from that internship program.
That
from
is
the Tonight
great.
Show
Woo!
to news organizations. I mean, thriving. There have been guys that started production companies. You know, it's been incredible. Now, other people come into it and go, this is not for me. I'm not interested, you know, I find anything, or I want to try and go the stand-up route, or different things like that. But the point of it is, what they needed more than anything was to believe in themselves, that the experience that they had in the military was not so eccentric, that the skills that they learned. Now, I understand, like, guys would come home and you'd be like, I drove rigs to try and do the thing, and then they come home and they can't get that licensed and they didn't pay. So we tried to talk to them about all the things that they had done that translate to any organization, bar none. The value that you bring is astonishing.
What is it about their service to their country and that whatever number of years they're in, that they don't believe that's relevant to real life? Does it say something about the American population?
No, I think it says something about the American military.
Yeah. What does it say about the American military?
That they keep you cloistered for a reason. That, you know, look, less than 1% of the population serves in the military, and that's for a purpose. And I don't give a shit if you serve because you love this country and you want to defend it, or it was either that or a drug program. Or if it was just your family thought, hey, we don't have money, and this seems like a very steady gig. Like, it doesn't fucking matter why you're there. The fact is, you're there. And you made that sacrifice and you made that commitment. There's a reason why we have an all-volunteer army, and one that is a small percentage of the American population. Because politicians can't use that capital if it belongs to everybody. If that human capital is in everybody's house, then people are going to start to complain. But if it's only in a few people's house and you don't really know anybody who's in the military and they want to send them on a wild goose chase in Niger, or they want to deploy them to Iraq, or they want to use burn pits, or they want you to sit next to depleted uranium for 2 years and then decide that your testicular cancer wasn't service related, like, they can do that. They can fuck with you if you don't have the country behind you. So what this country does for you is they pay you lip service, paper patriotism. They salute you at football games. It's all purposeful so that politicians can deploy you in any manner they choose fit.
How has that changed generationally? Let me.
Generationally, there was a draft.
Well, no, let's go back even. I want to go back even longer ago. I think you and I were of the same generation. You're a year older than I am, but that's okay.
I'm a year older than you? Are you kidding me? I look like I've been in a food dehydrator. How the fuck? Are you serious?
Yes, I looked this up. You're a year older. Exactly. You're November, I'm December. Anyway.
A year.
That is not the point of the conversation. Our generation.
Should I not be sleeping under a heat lamp? How? Explain this to me.
I think you're vegan, right? You're vegan?
No.
No? Okay. I don't know. I think you got to go see a doctor. I don't have any advice for you on that.
Do they make creams for this?
They do. They make great creams.
All right.
But the point of going down this path is I think our generation thinks of World War II veterans and the courage and bravery it took to land in Normandy and the cliffs of Normandy, et cetera. I don't think young Americans today have those examples of that bravery necessarily that is as prevalent for them, and I don't think Americans in general.
That's because the whole country wasn't, when World War II was going on, we were told it was an existential fight for the future of a free world and society. And people grew victory gardens, and they rationed
That was back then.
food and
Yeah.
materials and all kinds of things. And the country was involved in the effort. And the men had gone away to war, and the women came and worked in the factories. And it was a shared burden.
Yes.
If you remember, in the War on Terror, we were told, don't worry about it, go shopping. Literally, we were told to go shopping. We got this. We're going to do whatever we do with the veterans who signed up for it, with whatever patriotic energy was generated in this country from that kind of attack. But we're going to spend that capital. And we don't want the country involved in that, because guess what? We don't want you to have a say in it. I'm convinced that that's what it is. And I know that that sounds relatively conspiratorial. And I'm not suggesting that it's all done in a small room and that the Jews control it. Here's what I'm saying. If everybody's involved, then everybody could get mad. And that's what happened in Vietnam. Because in Vietnam, suddenly, it wasn't about a battle for the existential wealth of the free world. It was about the domino theory of a communist regime that if they get North Vietnam, then they'll get South Vietnam. And then after that, they'll get maybe Thailand. And most Americans would be like, I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Don't know where that is.
And so the country fought back. And the lesson learned from the powers that be was, we can't have this many voices telling us our policy, because we won't be able to do what we want to do. And so they told everybody to go shopping. And that allowed them to make the decisions that they made in a way that gave them more, I think, more credence than they would have had otherwise. But I refuse to believe that those that died at Normandy are braver than the people who died at Restrepo, or that went into Fallujah, or that were the tip of the spear leading in, or went to Afghanistan, or Tora Bora, or went down. Fuck that. That is a story we tell ourselves. Anybody that puts themselves in that position, no matter who you are, like, they're not the greatest generation. They're a generation, just like you're a generation, that did incredibly brave and heroic things for sometimes causes they believed in and sometimes not. And we've mythologized it in a way that I think negates the kind of sacrifice that's made now. I don't buy it.
So here we sit, New York City. I want to go to your advocacy for 9/11, for first responders.
Right.
You were in New York on September 11th, 2001.
Had nothing to do with it, honestly. I was with my wife.
Do you have proof of that?
She will vouch for it. Yes.
But, your show went off the air for a fair number of days. You came back very emotional in the show, really sang the praises of the first responders who were trying to rebuild. Fast forward many years later, you're still fighting for their benefits, for their health benefits.
Right.
Tell us that journey and that experience from being in New York on September 11th to shaming the House Judiciary Committee. I watched that. It was a visceral reaction to many. Talk to us about that journey. You can start wherever.
I was born in a small town. Well, obviously, September 11th was, I don't even know how many of you were even alive at that point, or, this is a younger room than that.
Not me.
Apparently not. I was going to say 9/11 aged me, but I don't even have that excuse. And I lived pretty close to Ground Zero, and so obviously, the smell, it was the fright. I'll tell you the craziest part about 9/11 is my wife's brother had just moved to the city that weekend. So if you remember, it was a long weekend. So we helped move him in about a block and a half from our apartment. And that morning, when the planes hit and we finally realized what was happening, we tried to get a hold of him. We couldn't get a hold of him. And so we ran out into the street, and this is when one of the towers collapsed. So we saw it go down. And you can imagine just the sheer, like, you know, it's that scene in Star Wars, you know, like the Death Star wiped out a planet, and you just, like, everybody just felt it, the disturbance in the force. And we ran to his apartment, and we're fucking banging on his door and ringing it. Finally, he comes downstairs, and we go, are you okay? Do you know what's going on? Are you sure you're okay? And he goes, what's going on? I go, there's planes went in there. And he goes, didn't you hear all the sirens? And he goes, I just moved here. I just thought that's how it was up there.
Yeah. Right.
So we all came to our, and obviously, look, it was disorienting to be in the kind of situation where in that moment you didn't know what was next. Is that the first salvo in what would be many more attacks or different kinds of attacks? Or, you know, we'd always been sort of protected by the oceans, but was this a fifth column within the United States? Are they activating sleeper cells? Like, everything was on the table, and people were scared shitless. And in the middle of it, you know, nobody could get down into Lower Manhattan. We were cordoned off from the world. And the smoke is heavy over your apartment, and the smell. And the only sort of beacon of stability were, on every corner, National Guard, firefighters, and cops. And you were like, oh, you're just gonna fucking hold us together until we get back on our feet. That when this hit and everyone ran that way, you ran this way. And 343 of you died, firefighters. And the role, listen, you always, whenever you're in trouble, you always think like, oh man, where's a cop? Or like, there's a thing with a firefighter. But you don't ever think like, oh, this is an essential molecular building block of a society. These are like, when it starts to fray, you're all just gonna hold hands until it comes back down, till the centrifugal force slows, and we all kind of land back on our feet and the vertigo goes away. And that, you know, that just stayed with me. Now, as you know, I'm somewhat opinionated. And after there was the move to move to Iraq after Afghanistan, I talked a lot of shit about it. And what I thought, though, at a certain point was, I should probably learn a little something about it personally to back it up. I don't want to just be talking out of my ass. So in 2003, I started going down to Walter Reed and just visiting, just talking to people after they had come in from being wounded. And so that's when I realized the level of human capital that we were, in my opinion, squandering. That's when I began to think, oh dear God, what have we done? And so it hardened my opinion about how cavalier the government had been with their foreign policy, how valuable the human capital was in our first responder and veterans communities. And I met some incredible people. I've got, you know, we were talking about flow earlier. I don't know where you're at there. We were talking about flow earlier. You know, there's a dude, I met him in a hospital in, I think, 2004 in Walter Reed. Like, just some dude who got blew up. And he was making me laugh, and he was a really good guy, and he was like super funny, and he was there with a girl, like, he was just a great guy. And years later, I'm doing an adaptive sports thing at Warrior Games, and Flo's there, a Medal of Honor awardee. And I was like, oh, dude. Remember we were in a hotel, remember your hospital room? And I was like, what happened to you? And you were like, oh, I just got blew up and shit. Like, you could have expounded on that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the humility of it all. And we started seeing the power of adapted sports through like the Warrior Games and all that. Like, when I first started visiting Walter Reed, like physical therapy was 2 double amps on a wrestling mat throwing a medicine ball at each other. And that was like, this should work. And now you go there and they've got like computerized balance machines and all this other shit. But like, it's intentional. Things don't get better unless they're intentional. And it's what made me realize what advocacy does for communities that are underserved.
And in that process of advocacy, do you feel like you've learned how to make change in Washington? How to drive change, force change?
Force is the word.
Force?
Yeah.
How?
You have to force it.
Have to be a pain in the ass?
And not like January 6th force.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
like, here's my thing about advocacy in Washington. Have a plan that doesn't involve the Confederate flag. So the thing that you learn about Washington is that they'll do whatever they have to do to not do anything. Cowardice is you know what they are? They're influencers.
Yeah.
They're just dudes with a brand trying to raise some money so that they can stay in this job. And some of them come in there with the right attitude. Our country's held together by hundreds of legislative aides, truthfully.
Yeah.
Like hardworking, first in,
Smart.
last out,
Yeah.
smart, dedicated, not that ideological. Some are, most aren't. And they're just trying to get shit done. And their bosses are like oftentimes just not that.
Yeah.
So what I've learned is, what I can offer sometimes is, and I'll put this in sort of a military paradigm, is I can sometimes provide air support to those that have been working in the trenches diligently for years.
That's great.
But if in Washington they think you'll go away, they'll let you. Like, they don't want to do anything. Like, I'll give you an example. The 9/11 thing was, so you know what that was, the Zadroga bill. All the first responders that were down at Ground Zero inhaled all those materials with jet fuel that had lit them, and they breathed it in for months in the dust, they ate there, they slept there, they cried, everything. And then they started getting sick. Meanwhile, 5 days after the attack, the Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection said, air's safe. Obviously the air wasn't safe. I fucking lived down there. Like, you could smell it wasn't safe. Air shouldn't smell like somebody burnt what they burnt. Yeah. So you knew there were going to be ramifications. And when they started coming, the government fought them on it. And so the Zadroga Act was to get the government to recognize that those cancers and other health issues were caused by exposures to Ground Zero and those pits. And that was a giant fight. What I didn't know at the time is that our soldiers overseas did that every day. Like, Ground Zero is one thing. That was a pit filled with terrible things lit by jet fuel that somebody did to us. Where you guys were, we did it to ourselves. You can't dig 10 acres of a pit and put everything you can think of from a military base in it and light it with jet fuel and let it go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and sleep next to it and not think. But the government pulled the same shit. Are you sure it's that?
And that led to the PACT Act.
That's correct.
And that was passed. Do you feel having some success in that? You know, I mean, you talk about the 9/11 being the first, burn pit, but the military sort of. Do you feel like you've actually had some success? Or does it still just feel like a battle? Yeah.
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 You can't feel like getting somebody to the place they should have been isn't success. It's wasted time. It's how you feel when you miss your exit on the turnpike.
Yeah.
Like, you miss your exit, and then the rest of the time till you get back to the exit, you're like, I can't fucking believe this.
Yeah.
So, like, that drives you crazy. That's what this was.
Yeah.
And the story of it will blow your mind. So after the Zadroga thing, we got contacted by a woman named Rosie Torres from an organization called Burn Pits 360. And this gets back to just individuals starting organizations for themselves because they realize nobody's helping. Nobody's, because they'll just let you die. Somebody once said, one of our writers at the show, and she's quoting somebody else, said, be very careful when anybody refers to you as a hero because that means they're willing to let you die. And that's true. So Rosie, her husband Leroy Torres, had served in Balad. Did anybody here serve in Balad? So Balad was where the biggest burn pit was. It was 10 acres, and they burned all the time. Rosie's husband Leroy got there, and soon thereafter couldn't breathe. And he was there for a year, and he got home, and he became a Texas State Trooper. And he started having crazy problems with his lungs and with everything else, and they fired him. And so they filed a lawsuit, and they started this thing, and they lost everything. Leroy threatened to commit suicide. By the grace of God, was talked out of it. And they started this Burn Pits 360 out of their garage. And they worked for 10 years trying to get anybody in Washington to pay attention. And so she finally came to myself and this guy, John Feel, from the Feel Good Foundation, who had been so instrumental in the Zadroga Act. She said, can you guys help us with this? And we said, Jesus, that sounds like the exact same thing that happened to the person. We'd love to. So the first thing we did is we set up a meeting in Washington, D.C. with what's called the For Country Caucus. Nonpartisan. Oh.
Yeah.
Both parties working together.
Yeah.
They were all veterans, Republicans and Democrats. And they were going to sit with us and they were going to learn about it. So we sat them down in a room and we presented the case. And they were moved. It was undeniable. Rosie had compiled, we had fucking letters from the Pentagon saying, these burn pits will be killing our soldiers with these diseases. We had letters from the VA. You will soon be seeing these diseases from our soldiers that had been deployed. Look out for them. From 2007, 2008. This is like 2021. And nothing had been done. It was documented. And you couldn't sue KBR, the people that ran the burn pits, because they have sovereign immunity, because why shouldn't they? Yeah. I get very emotional about this. It's fucking crazy. So we explained it to these representatives, and they were receptive, because it's undeniable. And when the meeting was over, two of them pulled us aside and said, we really want to do something on this burn pits issue. But it's really busy here. Would you write it? And we were like, write what? Like a letter?
Law?
And they go, the law.
Oh my gosh.
Would you write the law? So if you want to know why our financial regulation laws and our banking laws are the way they are, it's because Congress people say to big banks, it's really busy here.
Yeah, yeah.
But we'd love to regulate you. Could you write it? I feel like I'm breaking the hearts of children. Like I'm literally like seeing wide-eyed children, and I'm just like, your government is corrupt. And they're like, Santa's not real? Mickey's not a real mouse?
I would love to get to some audience questions if you don't mind.
Please.
Mike, where's Mike? We've got Dory.
By the way, if you don't have to get back to work, which I know you don't.
Yeah.
I'm happy to stay and answer as long as you want. I got nothing to do.
That's great. We have a ton of questions coming into Dory.
Yeah.
Mike and Jeff are gonna.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Sorry, not to surprise you. Happy to kick it off with the first one.
Being flanked.
And that is accurate. Actually, you talked about internship programs and advocacy. So, first question from Robert Bernarski, Army veteran.
Sure, Bernarski.
Skillbridge graduate from Google. Google's a big Skillbridge program. But
don't.
and a Googler now, happily. So congratulations to Robert. But wants to know, he comments your work on the Zadroga Act and the PACT Act are widely recognized as pivotal. How do you think other people of influence can use their status to make progress on blocked causes? And in today's socio-political atmosphere, is it political for some of them to abstain from the conversation? Thanks, Robert.
That's a great question, Robert. The thing that I think somebody who is going to take a cause on from a platform where they can get attention, the first thing you try and do is fact find. You don't do performative activism. You don't put on the shirt and go down and do the thing. Like, you do the things that happen in the rooms that nobody knows about. First thing we did with the PACT Act is we got together veterans organizations, from DAV to Wounded Warriors to IAVA to Vietnam Veterans of America. Every advocacy group, TAPS, anybody we could think of, Gold Star families, and we put them all in a room and said, what would fix this? And that became the framework of the PACT Act. And the interesting thing about what those groups is they laid out pretty cleanly what would fix it within 10 minutes. And they spent the next hour and a half negotiating against themselves due to what they thought were the realities of Washington. So the thing that you can do as an advocate is, there's a lot of people working towards the same goals in disparate areas that aren't working together. But you know, as veterans, strength is in numbers and in working together and formulating a strategy and a plan that's inclusive. And so if you can look at it from a macro and pull together the different groups that may have slightly different agendas and slightly different constituencies and find their common purposes, right? And then you lay it out, and suddenly you have force amplifiers. You have all people, and you can't be divided and conquered. You can't have one senator promising to cut a deal with DAV because their issue is hypertension. If I give you hypertension, do you promise to stop supporting the PACT Act and you'll just support Manchin-Sullivan? Because Manchin-Sullivan, that just deals with hypertension. It's only going to cost us $100 million. What they all try and do is save fucking money, including the VSOs. And so what happened was, we sat in that room and they negotiated against themselves on the PACT Act because they didn't think they could get it through. And the reason they couldn't get it through was money. And I said, why don't we do a war profiteers tax? Raytheon, McDonnell Douglas, $400 billion a year of the defense budget goes to defense contractors for toys. 2% of that covers all of these health issues that are made, right? That we were too stupid to budget for in the first place. And they all went, that's perfect, awesome. And then I left. And then an hour later, I got a call. We can't do that. And guess what happened in that hour? Who
Lobbyists.
sponsors the VSOs? Raytheon, McDonnell Douglas, and all the defense contractors. So for $1 million, they get out of paying $1 billion. And that's the game they're running. And so we had to break out of that and find a way to get common purpose with everybody so that we could move forward as a unit in strength and protect our flanks and make sure that we move there. It's complicated.
Yeah.
And you have to be in the weeds.
Thank you so much. We have another question from an external live stream viewer, Andrew and a couple others. There's a lot of important issues in the world. How do you prioritize your time to focus your efforts and allocate your resources towards, specifically around veterans?
How do I do it, or how do they do it?
How do you do it
Oh.
to amplify needs and issues and concerns?
It's hard because the man hours that it takes for each issue are considerable. And you are also a husband and a father, I think. Let me check my phone. Yeah, that's their picture. You know, there's a lot that you need to do in your life, and you also, like, one of the things that's really important for people who work in those spaces, like, because I just got to drop in. Like I'd come in for meetings and I'd help with strategies and I'd do all those, but those people are living it day to day to day to day. Many of them with loved ones that had terrible cancers. We lost people, advocates that were with us in the beginning that died before we got to the finish line, whose last moments were spent advocating for the brothers and sisters so that they wouldn't have to go through what they had been through. When you give that much of yourself, and I didn't have to, but they did, like, you also have to take care of yourself. Like Rosie and her husband, like we almost lost them. And it's really important. And that's where bringing it back to networks, like you have to keep up with each other. And those networks have to be managed. You can't just let them be, artificial intelligence bots that just exist. Like when we did the internship program, right? We had a message board and we wanted everybody that went through the message board to just post ideas that they had or things like that. And it failed. But then what we did is we took a person at the show who'd been in the veterans program and we put them on the message board. Manage this actively. Reach out to people at regular intervals. Check in with them. Hold them accountable. Find out where they are. Don't let them slip away. Make this board come alive. Make it feel like there's a real person behind it who has real feelings about how well you do moving forward. This isn't the end of the relationship. This is just the foundation of it. And continue to cultivate it. And if you don't cultivate those networks, they wither. None of this shit is easy. But neither is military service. Like, you know how to do this. All of you.
All right, I think we have one last question. You talked a little bit about your time working at the punk club. You called it once the most violent place you've ever been, but also the happiest you've ever been. When you look back at all the successes you've ever had, is that a time, where does that time stand out to you? How do you sort of reflect upon that? Do you think that is still the happiest place you've ever been, post all these successes you've ever had?
The happiest place.
It was the place, so sometimes a happy place is a place that represents the most possibility. And that's what that place represented to me, was possibility. Jesus, Gibby Haynes from Butthole Surfers lit the place on fire because they wouldn't let him have his topless dancers. It's the shit that happened there. It's the only place I've ever held a gun in a live gun situation. The band X, Exene Cervanka and John Doe, were playing a show, and this was a punk club. And punks, I don't know if you know this, very short-tempered. And there was an off-duty cop in there, and he got in an altercation with these two punks, and it was a brawl. And then the whole fucking place went up. And somehow I ended up with this cop's gun behind the bar. And so I did one of those that you can't even believe is real except in like an Eddie Murphy movie, where I got the gun and I go, "Everybody calm down!" And all I could think was, this is heavy! Way heavier than I thought it was gonna be. You just didn't know what was going to happen, and it was dangerous and loving at the same time. It was, everybody had like a weirdly similar ethos, and it was incredibly warm, and people boosted each other, and it was just this incredibly wonderful time. Maybe the best moment being after the blood was mopped up and the people had been taken out and all those things, two cops in uniform walking a plainclothes cop behind the bar and going, "Could you give him back his gun?"
That's great.
Let me go here. I got it with the limes.
John, I want to thank you so much for
My
your time.
pleasure. Thank you guys for putting together such a great program for veterans. You know,
we often talk about sort of the millennial generation, Gen X, Gen Z generation as being very purpose-driven and very focused on purpose and having a higher purpose in life than just sort of coming to work every day. And I think you're a great example of a man who has lived a life of purpose, particularly these last several decades. And you've got a lot of living to do, my friend.
I think what you're saying is you seem a lot like a millennial. That's what I'm hearing. You're younger than me.
I want to thank you. I know our New York City audience wants to thank you. Thank you to everybody online.
Thank you guys very much. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you want to stay, we have a reception from 6 to 7 out there. And thank you so much for joining us, everyone.